Hello, this is Debate Nebraska's video for Extinction First in Debate. So, what is Extinction First? You're going to hear it a lot in your rounds if you're debating on the national circuit or debating progressive debate, or especially in policy, people will be making these arguments. So, what is Extinction First? So, Extinction First is the argument that existential risks should be prioritized in debate. And this argument is very core to a lot of policy style debates. You'll see it in policy debate, but you'll also see it in LD and maybe even other events like PF, where if people make some sort of impact within existential risk, so causing human extinction, people will make the argument that extinction should come first when evaluating the rounds. And this is strategic because there's a wide variety of impacts that can plausibly cause extinction. For instance, the big one is nuclear war impacts. There's also climate change impacts, disease impacts, and so on. It's also easier to weigh when you make these arguments of extinction first because you're basically just prioritizing existential impacts, which is much easier to weigh against arguably like smaller impacts. So for instance, a global nuclear war that causes human extinction versus maybe like economic decline or something. These two different impacts are easier to weigh, and it's easier to be able to determine which one outweighs under the lens of extinction first, because obviously a global nuclear war would beat back any like economic impact. So extinction first justifications, there are many of these that people can make. So in LD, these are common enough to see. So moral uncertainty, basically the argument here is that preservation of the world is a prior question to being able to debate about it. And this is common in a lot of framework v. framework debates in LD. So for instance, the fact that we're having, let's say I'm like running a utilitarian framework and my opponent's running a Kantian framework, a reason I can, for moral uncertainty, an argument that I can make here is that prior to the question of whether Util or Kant is correct about interpreting the world through ethics, we have to preserve the world in order to keep debating about it. And this is proven by the fact that we're having this framework debate. We have to preserve the world in order to continue debating about the framework, which allows for the best honesty towards things like moral uncertainty. So the fact that we're uncertain about the world means that we have to preserve it in order to become more certain about it or progress in terms of achieving like ethical understandings of the world. And yeah, so this is a great argument to make because it sort of precedes the framework debate. And if you win moral uncertainty, and that if you win that it comes before framework, that means that they're not really able to, your opponent isn't able to cross-apply their framework in answering extinction first, which is strategic for you to do. And the next argument is future lives outweigh. So if an extinction event occurs, it destroys any possibility of human life in the future. Because if everyone's dead, we can no longer like have future lives, because obviously we're not able to like reproduce, we're not able to continue humanity because we're all dead. And this argument is that because we're basically erasing infinite like future lives, we're sort of just destroying infinite value at that point, which is bad. This is an impact that has like infinite magnitude, because we are destroying infinite value by closing off humanity from ever like existing. And the next argument here is Pascal's wager. So Pascal's wager is originally about God, where if there's a chance that God exists, we ought to abide by like religious principles and whatnot. So this is applied in debate towards talking about existential risks, because a risk that extinction outweighs means that you should prefer it as an impact to avoid. Because a risk that extinction even happens would and if that were wrong, that we shouldn't focus on extinction, if we're wrong about that, then a risk that extinction actually occurs is enough to prioritize it because of its infinite magnitude of impact, that we would like suffer infinitely if we ignore like existential risks, which means that just a risk of extinction happening or risk of extinction outweighing their impacts is a reason we ought to prioritize it. And there's also an argument about reversibility. Essentially, it closes off any future progress in humanity or in society because we are all dead, basically. We can never improve, like, for instance, like structural violences or structural issues in society. Any event that requires, or any like process that is bad in the world that we can observe, we can never achieve progress towards eliminating it because you're killing all human life, which necessitates that we prioritize extinction because it's an irreversible impact. We are not able to progress as a society if we're all dead, which means that it comes as a prior question to any of like their impacts in that manner. The next justification for extinction first is a mathematical analysis of it. So things like calculations that deal with lives and values being lost. You'll see in the next slide we'll talk about different cards that use mathematical justifications in proving why extinction outweighs. There's also calculations where you multiply the impact of an event with the probability of it, and because of the fact that extinction has an infinite impact or magnitude towards it, the probability can be like infinitesimal, but it would still outweigh because of that infinite impact. And there are other like mathematical justifications for dealing with the numbers of value and the numbers regarding lives and such, where they conclude that extinction comes first. And this is in different pieces of evidence, which is the next slide. So common cards that people will read to justify extinction first. First is Mac Gaskell. It makes a claim about moral uncertainty, and it also makes a claim about future lives, and then also makes a mathematical claim. Most of the card is really just the mathematics towards calculating the lives lost every second we aren't like valuing extinction and things like that. The cost of waiting for understanding whether life has value, like, is sort of outweighed by extinction and stuff. So yeah, this card basically gives a mathematical analysis as to why extinction outweighs regarding the lives and also regarding the question of whether life has value, and promotes this concept of moral uncertainty that necessitates extinction having to be prioritized. The next card that's common is the Pummer evidence. So Pummer also makes a claim about moral uncertainty, that a risk of extinction means that we have to prioritize that, and that existential impacts come first under any moral or ethical framework. It also makes a claim about infinite future lives being lost, which also ties into the argument on the last slide that we talked about. And then the next card is Bostrom. Bostrom, there are different pieces of Bostrom evidence, but a common piece of Bostrom evidence that you can find all these cards in the doc and description of this video. But the common argument that Bostrom makes, or the common card that is read, is just about moral uncertainty, about how if we're unsure about which ethical interpretation of the world is true, we must preserve humanity in order to progress towards achieving that. So yeah, all these three cards are attached in a link, a Google Drive link in the description below, so feel free to check that out. And yeah, this was just an introduction to the common justifications and what really is extinction first.